Hello there. I wanted to just talk a little bit about the subject of gender and the elements, because the work we've been doing with Tammy de Jong's work and Brand Collingwood's work on the Wheel of the Elemental Archetypes has been very, very interesting, um, and it really brings up a lot of things, and it reminds me of stuff that I've thought about. And one thing that I wanted to talk about was what happens when somebody is a man that has a sort of like a feminine essence, or a woman that has a masculine essence. And of course, I'm using that word essence quite vaguely, really. Um, I think it's quite a complex issue. It's quite complex what your nature is. There are a lot of things that go into making your nature, and the thing is that I think you will find that, for instance, the masculine or the feminine, in some form or other, will mean something very, very central to you, have a core meaning for you which you relate to. And I think that's what I'm really meaning by essence. So um, I think we all have everything in us, really, but there is always a certain relationship you have to what you would loosely call the sacred. Um, and there are things which act as keys to that for you and which have great meaning for you. And a man can find that the feminine is really his his core nature in a sense, and a woman can find that the masculine is her core nature, you know. And this doesn't stop them being men or women, yeah. It simply is a part of how they function, and it's something which they often discover over time because we're not really equipped as a society in general to really understand these things. And, you know, recent political developments haven't really clarified that either. They've become very, very sort of mental, very, very ideological, and this doesn't touch on the soul of these things really at all, as far as I can see. Um, what I think happens, and I'll say from the point of view of uh, a man that has a feminine essence or a core feminine quality which is of enormous importance to him, and we can see that in the archetypes, as well. We can see that it will probably talk through the language of the elements in that way. A man has to work out how to understand that essence and be able to express that essence, but also express it through a body and a biology which is masculine. And you have to have both for it to be manifest. For the essence to be manifest, it has to be able to manifest physically in actual life, in some sense. And how that happens is often over time, I think. I see a lot of, or I have seen a lot of cases where it seemed that, for instance, with some gay men, they sensed they had a feminine essence, or they sensed that they had this core feminine quality that they needed to honor, but they couldn't understand that they still had to do it through a masculine form in a sense. So they ended up trying to uh, imitate their idea of women, for instance, which isn't the point at all. Uh, and you often found that they really got into a kind of a fix, I think, and you can see that something was blocked and stuck, and it comes out being very, very negative. Um, Whereas you can get a man who is really, in all respects, very manly and has his masculine in his at home in his body, at home in the masculinity of his physical form, of his biology, and all these things. but the feminine is still his core reality in a sense, or the informing reality, or the I don't know how else you want to put it. Um, I very much like to look to the Wheel of the Archetypes, and I think the Wheel of the Archetypes is really a fascinating thing. And you see in the Wheel of the Archetypes, you see that there are the four cardinal archetypes. At the four quarters, there are the cardinals of the elements, and you will see that there's a horizontal axis, which actually is the feminine axis, and then there's a vertical axis, which is the masculine axis. But you'll also see that the cardinals themselves express themselves through the adjacent archetypes, the quadrant archetypes, and also they give their element to all of the archetypes so that they can all manifest in real life. And I think the cardinals always really speak to us in a very almost mythic sense, I think. And yet it's definitely a question as to what's happening when somebody seems to actually manifest these in a very particular form. How much of it is their informing energy being expressed in different ways, and then we see it that way. We see them as, say, an enchantress type person, or a joker type person, or a magician type person, or a Mother Nature type person. It's always an interesting question, because if you look at the enchantress, for instance, the enchantress expresses herself through the actress and through the child or angel archetype or nymph. And you can see that it's just a very interesting question. If somebody appears really, really enchantressy, what's going on there? Yeah. And I think I find it a fascinating question because it's one which I think speaks to us very deeply. We all want to understand and be true to the element that speaks to us most deeply somehow. And that means we always have a certain kind of almost sacred relationship to one or other of the cardinals, I think. And this is a perfectly good thing, but of course it has to be balanced by understanding that those cardinals express in our lives through the quadrants, and that it has to be done through the inner and outer journeys and the circulations of the energies, and that this is what we basically have to do. So we have this whole process in motion working through our lives, and our psyches are in fact balanced. Our psyches are in fact not just one archetype or not just one cardinal or anything like that, but still I think in general a person has a particular orientation. You could maybe call it a kind of soul orientation, but I'm using that word poetically. Yeah. And it really informs their life and what they gravitate towards and what their life moves around. And I think it's something which a person has to come to terms with. So I think that's about as much as I could say on it really at the moment. But I think it's an interesting question. I think it really is. And as ever, this scheme is so fascinating for me, and so edifying in so many ways. And it really speaks to you, and you can see it reflected in so much in art, in drama, in everyday life. You can find it all over the place, and so there are just endless opportunities for actually exploring yourself and exploring life, more importantly, and exploring your connection to life and where your course is actually going and how it can go there. Okay, that's it for today. I just wanted to add here that when I'm talking about essences, I am speaking in sort of poetic sense, really. Um, I do think that what makes up our natures is complex. Um, and underneath that, you actually have access to everything. You have access to everything. And you're not any one of the archetypes or even definitively a specific combination of the archetypes. Um, you are you. You are yourself. You are an individual. Yeah. But what I wanted to really explore in the video was the particular position of the cardinals in our kind of psychic life, in a sense, and how they might occur to us, and maybe why that is partly, but also how they occur to us. And I'm still very interested in the nature of cardinal expression, because what I've learnt over this last year is that the cardinals express themselves through the quadrants in inner and outer forms, which form parts of the inner and outer journey, and so that's uh, that's a real thing there. And so in that case, when you're seeing a cardinal in someone, what, in a sense, are you seeing? That's what I'm meaning. Given that the expressions of them are quadrant expressions. Yeah. So that's part of what I was looking into in this video, and seeing where it might lead. Now, I think where that relates to the question of gender is that the cardinals and their axes really are the masculine and feminine axes of the wheel, and they are the only archetypes which are entirely masculine or entirely feminine in their makeup. So I think that's probably where it fits into the gender question, which is just another thing which just does really interest me, because it involves so many things, and I think it's another interesting point.